The scream didn't sound human at first. It sounded like a wounded animal, high-pitched and tearing through the heavy curtain of thunder that was shaking the Missouri hills. I was parked in the blackest corner of a gravel turnout, trying to sleep off 1,000 miles of asphalt, but that sound woke up ghosts I thought I'd buried in the desert years ago. Then came the pounding. Not a knock, a frantic bone-breaking hammering on the passenger side door, down low near the running board. I ripped the curtain back. Lightning flashed, bleaching the world white for a split second, and I saw her. A tiny hand smeared with mud, a face distorted by terror, a little girl maybe 7 years old soaked in rain and blood, screaming at my glass. "They hung her! Open the door! Please, mister, they hung my mom!" I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. You don't hesitate when a child screams like that. I hit the unlock switch and shoved the passenger door open. The storm blew in instantly, a wet, freezing gust that smelled of ozone and wet pine. The little girl scrambled up the steps, her bare feet slipping on the diamond plate metal. I reached out and grabbed her by the back of her thin, torn nightgown, hauling her into the cab before she could fall. She collapsed onto the floor mat, a shivering pile of mud and trauma. "Lock it!" she shrieked, scrambling backward until her back hit the dashboard. She was hugging her knees, her teeth chattering so hard it sounded like dice rattling in a cup. "Lock it! He's coming! The scorpion is coming!" I slammed the door and punched the lock. The sudden silence of the cab, insulated from the roaring wind outside, felt heavy. I looked at her. She was a wreck. Her hair was plastered to her skull, her skin was blue with cold, and there was a nasty gash on her shoulder that was bleeding sluggishly. But it was her eyes that froze my blood. They were wide, dilated, fixed on the darkness outside the window. "Easy," I said, my voice rumbling low in my chest. I keep my voice calm. It's a tool just like the Jake brake or the tire thumper. You're safe here. Nobody's getting in this truck. "Oh, you don't understand." She lunged at me, grabbing my flannel shirt with ice-cold, muddy fingers. "They put a rope on her. They put her on the bucket. He's going to kick it. You have to go. You have to kill him." The bucket. The image hit me with the force of a blowout at 70 miles an hour. I knew exactly what she was talking about. It's an old, cruel trick. You put a victim on a bucket with a noose tight around their neck. As long as they can balance, as long as their legs hold out, they live. But the moment they get tired, the moment they slip, I felt the shift happen inside me. The exhaustion that had been weighing on my eyelids for the last 300 miles evaporated. The ache in my lower back vanished. The driver part of me, Jack Mercer, the guy who worries about fuel prices and logbooks, stepped back. Redline stepped forward. "Where?" I asked. She pointed a shaking finger toward the dense tree line bordering the turnout. The old logging road. "Back there. Please, she can't stand much longer." "Stay here," I ordered. "Get in the bunk. Cover up with the quilt. Do not open this door for anyone but me or a state trooper. You understand?" She nodded, tears cutting tracks through the mud on her face. I reached under the driver's seat. My hand closed around the grip of the tire thumper. It's 18 inches of solid hickory, drilled out and filled with lead, wrapped in grip tape. It's technically for checking tire pressure. In the right hands, it's a gavel that delivers a very final kind of verdict. I grabbed my heavy-duty maglite with my other hand. Before I moved, I keyed the mic on the CB. I didn't know who was out there tonight. The storm had the airwaves full of static, crackling like bacon grease, but the Brotherhood is always listening. "Breaker 19, I said, pressing the mic close to my lips. My voice was flat, devoid of the panic I felt rising in my gut. "This is Redline at the Devil's Elbow turnout, mile marker 142 on the old Route 66 spur. I have a code red, child involved. Repeat, code red. Active torture scenario. I'm going off-road. If you can hear me, get to 142. Bring the iron." I didn't wait for a reply. I dropped the mic, killed the cab lights, and opened the driver's side door. The rain hit me like a physical blow. It was coming down in sheets, cold and relentless. I slid down the steps and hit the gravel, my boots crunching softly. The mud was ankle-deep instantly, a thick, sucking clay that tried to hold me in place. I ignored it. I moved toward the tree line, staying low, using the darkness. I entered the woods. The canopy of old-growth oak and pine blocked some of the rain, but it made the darkness almost absolute. I didn't turn on my flashlight. I couldn't risk giving away my position. I let my eyes adjust, navigating by the strobing flashes of lightning that tore through the sky every few seconds. Crack boom. The thunder shook the ground beneath my feet. I moved fast, rolling my steps from heel to toe to minimize the sound, slipping through the wet underbrush like a shadow. I've hunted in woods like these. I've fought in places much worse than this. 100 yards in, the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. 200 yards, the smell of gasoline and cigarette smoke. I slowed down. Ahead, through the dense weave of briars and saplings, I saw the glow. Artificial light, halogen yellow. It cut through the mist, illuminating the rain like falling diamonds. I crept closer, pushing through a thicket of thorns that snagged my jacket. I ignored the scratches. I stopped behind the massive trunk of a black walnut tree and peered into the clearing. My stomach turned over hard. It was a small, muddy clearing where an old logging trail dead-ended. 3 pickup trucks were parked in a semicircle, their headlights off, but 4 men were standing around a massive, gnarled oak tree. They had set up portable construction lights, flooding the center of the clearing with harsh, unforgiving brightness. And there she was. The woman, Sarah, the girl had called her, was suspended from a thick branch about 10 feet off the ground. A bright yellow nylon tow rope was cinched tight around her neck. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, forcing her shoulders into an agonizing angle. She wasn't hanging freely, not yet. She was standing on her very tiptoes on a rusted, overturned 5-gallon joint compound bucket. The plastic was wet and slick with mud. Her bare feet were trembling violently as she fought to keep her balance. Her chin was forced up by the rope, her face swollen and purple, her mouth open as she gasped for tiny, ragged sips of air. She was beaten bad. One eye was swollen shut, a dark hematoma blooming on her cheekbone. Her dress was torn. She was soaked, shivering, and fighting a losing battle against gravity. Every time her leg muscles spasmed, the bucket wobbled. Every time the bucket wobbled, the rope bit deeper. Around her, the 4 men were watching like it was a spectator sport. They were locals. Rough, hard men in Carhartt jackets and muddy work boots. They held beer cans and cigarettes, laughing as the rain poured down on the dying woman. The ringleader was standing right next to the bucket. He was a monster of a man, wide as a vending machine, with a shaved head that glistened in the rain. A tattoo of a black scorpion crawled up the side of his neck, its tail curling behind his ear. He was holding an aluminum baseball bat, tapping it rhythmically against the side of the plastic bucket. Tap, tap, tap. "You holding up okay up there, Sarah?" Scorpion asked. His voice was a gravelly sneer that carried over the sound of the rain. "You look a little wobbly, darling." The woman couldn't speak. She just made a wet, choking sound, tears streaming from her good eye, mixing with the blood on her face. She tried to shake her head, begging him. "Where is she?" Scorpion roared suddenly, slamming the bat into the mud next to the bucket. The vibration almost sent her slipping. She gasped, a desperate, strangled noise as the rope tightened. "Where did the brat go? You tell me where she is and I let you step down. You keep quiet, and I kick this thing out from under you and watch you dance." "She... run!" the woman managed to wheeze out. "Gone." "Gone where?" Scorpion laughed, a cruel, dry sound. "Ain't nowhere to go. Just woods and highway. My boys will find her, and when they do, I'm going to put her on a bucket right next to you. A smaller one." The other 3 men laughed. One of them, a skinny, rat-faced guy with a jagged scar on his chin, took a drag from his cigarette and flicked the butt at the woman. It hit her bare leg and she flinched, almost losing her footing. The bucket shifted on the mud. She screamed, a tiny, airless squeak as the noose cut off her windpipe for a second before she regained her balance. "Careful now," Ratface giggled. "Don't want to end the show too early." I felt a cold rage settle over me. It wasn't the hot, blinding anger of a bar fight. It was the icy, calculated detachment of a soldier looking at an enemy combatant. These men weren't just criminals. They were predators. They enjoyed this. They had forfeited their right to walk away. I scanned the perimeter. 4 tangos. Scorpion was the biggest threat, physically and psychologically. He had the bat. The others likely had knives or concealed pistols, but they were relaxed. They were arrogant. They thought they were the kings of this little patch of hell. I gripped the hickory tire thumper until my knuckles turned white. I shifted my weight, testing the mud. I needed to close the distance before they could react. I needed to draw their attention away from the bucket. If Scorpion panicked and kicked it, she was dead in seconds. I took a breath, smelling the rain and the ozone. Then I stepped out from behind the walnut tree, walking straight into the pool of harsh yellow light. "Step away from the lady." My voice wasn't a shout. It was a command. A low, vibrating rumble that cut through the noise of the storm like a diesel engine. The reaction was immediate. The 4 men spun around, slipping in the mud. Flashlight beams swung wildly, 4 or 5 of them hitting me in the face at once. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I kept walking, a steady, rhythmic pace, the tire thumper resting loosely in my right hand, the heavy maglite in my left. "Who the hell are you?" Scorpion squinted, shielding his eyes from the glare of his own lights reflecting off the wet trees. He didn't look scared. He looked offended. "You lost, fat boy?" I stopped 10 feet from them, close enough to smell the stale beer on their breath, close enough to see the dilated pupils of men high on adrenaline and cruelty. "I said step away," I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. "And cut her down, now." The other 3 men fanned out, flanking me. It was a pack tactic, wolves circling a bison. They were laughing. They saw a middle-aged trucker in a grease-stained jacket, graying beard, a little heavy around the middle. They didn't see the muscle underneath the fat. They didn't see the way I was standing, balanced on the balls of my feet. They didn't see the eyes that had watched convoys burn in the sandbox. "Look at this," Ratface spat, pulling a 6-inch buckknife from his belt. "Knight in shining armor. You know whose land you're on, old man? You know who we are?" "I don't care who you are," I said, my eyes locked on Scorpion. "I'm the guy giving you exactly 1 chance to walk away with your knees working." Scorpion chuckled. It was a hollow, ugly sound. He turned back to the woman and tapped the bucket again, hard. The bucket slid an inch in the mud. The woman let out a strangled cry, her toes scrabbling for purchase, her eyes rolling back in her head. "You ain't in a position to give orders," Scorpion said, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Boys, teach him some manners. Gut him. Then we'll go check his truck for the kid." That was the trigger. Ratface lunged first. He was fast. I'll give him that. He came at me with the knife held low, aiming for the soft spot under my ribs. He thought I was slow. He thought I was just a truck driver. He telegraphed the move from a mile away. I didn't back up. I stepped into him. I pivoted on my left heel, slipping inside his guard. I brought the tire thumper down in a short, chopping arc. Crack! The sound of the hickory hitting his wrist was sickeningly loud, like a dry branch snapping. Ratface screamed, the knife flying from his useless hand into the darkness. Before he could even process the pain, I drove the steel toe of my boot into his kneecap. There was a wet crunch, and he folded like a cheap lawn chair, face planting into the mud, writhing and wailing, 1 down. The other 2 hesitated. They froze, their eyes going wide. The laughter died instantly. They looked at their friend screaming in the dirt, then back at me. I hadn't even breathed hard yet. I just stood there, the rain dripping off the brim of my cap, the tire thumper ready. "Get him!" Scorpion roared, backing up toward the bucket, raising his bat high. "Kill him, you idiots!" The remaining two lackeys looked at each other, then charged together. One, a heavy-set guy in a camo poncho, swung a heavy flashlight at my head. The other, a younger guy in a hoodie, tried to tackle me around the waist. I braced myself. This was going to hurt. I blocked the flashlight with my left forearm. The heavy metal tube connected with my radius, and pain shot through my arm like white-hot wire. My arm went numb, but the bone held. I gritted my teeth and used the momentum to swing the heavy maglite in my left hand. I brought it down hard on Camo Poncho's collarbone. I felt the bone give way. He grunted, the air leaving his lungs in a rush, and staggered back. But the hoodie guy hit me low. He slammed his shoulder into my gut, driving me backward. My boots slipped in the mud. We both went down, splashing into the cold, filthy slush. He was on top of me instantly, scrabbling for my throat, his thumbs digging in to choke me out. Mud filled my mouth. I couldn't breathe. He was screaming in my face, spittle flying. "Die, die, you old freak!" I didn't panic. Panic kills you. I tucked my chin to protect my windpipe. I planted my feet and bridged my hips, bucking him upward. At the same time, I brought the butt of the tire thumper up, driving it into his ribs. He gasped, his grip loosening just a fraction. That was all I needed. I headbutted him, crack, my forehead against his nose. Blood sprayed across my face, blinding me for a second. He rolled off me, clutching his face, howling. I scrambled to my feet, wiping the mud and blood from my eyes. My chest was heaving now. My left arm was throbbing with a dull, sickening ache. I looked up. Scorpion wasn't charging. He was standing right next to the woman. He had the aluminum bat raised, but not at me. He was aiming at the bucket. "Stay back!" he screamed, his voice pitching up into hysteria. He was sweating now, realized he'd miscalculated. "You take one more step and I knock this bucket out. She snaps, you hear me? I'll break her neck." I froze. I was 15 feet away, too far. The mud was too deep. If I lunged, he'd swing. If the bucket flew out, the sudden drop would snap her cervical vertebrae before I could even take 2 steps. The woman was staring at me. Her face was a mask of agony. She wasn't pleading for her life anymore. She was looking at me with a terrifying acceptance. "Don't," her eyes said. "Don't let him hurt my girl." "You made a mistake coming here, trucker," Scorpion hissed, trembling. "You think you're a hero? You're just a corpse that hasn't cooled down yet. I'm gonna finish her, right now, and then I'm gonna burn your truck with that brat inside." "You touch that bucket," I said, my voice barely a whisper, breathless and raw, "and there isn't a hole on God's earth deep enough to hide you." "Yeah?" Scorpion grinned, a manic, desperate look in his eyes. He tightened his grip on the bat. "Watch me." He tensed his muscles to swing. I coiled my legs, preparing to launch myself, knowing in my gut that I was going to be too slow. I was going to watch her die. But I had to try. I took a breath to scream, to charge, to do something. And then the sound cut through the forest. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't the wind. It was a deep, resonating bass note that vibrated the fillings in my teeth. A low, mournful blast that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Poonk. Scorpion flinched. His head snapped toward the road. Boo, boonk. Then another tone joined it, higher pitched, sharper, then another, then a siren, then the distinct rhythmic screech of air brakes engaging. The woods, which had been dark except for the construction lights, suddenly exploded with light. It started as a glow through the trees, like a sunrise on fast forward. Then beams of pure, blinding white light cut through the foliage. High beams, spotlights, light bars. They sliced through the rain, illuminating the clearing like a football stadium. The roar of diesel engines, not one, but dozens, filled the air, drowning out the storm. The ground actually shook. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on Scorpion. I saw his face drain of all color. I saw the bat waver in his hands. "What?" he stammered, squinting into the blinding wall of light. "What is that?" I took a slow step forward, gripping my tire thumper. "That," I said, letting the satisfaction bleed into my voice, "is the cavalry." I didn't wait for Scorpion to process the wall of light that had just turned his private torture chamber into the main stage of a stadium. While he was squinting, blinded by the high beams of 50 rigs, I moved. I didn't have a weapon anymore. I dropped the maglite to protect my arm, and the tire thumper was still in my hand, heavy and wet. I didn't charge him. I charged the bucket. Scorpion realized what was happening a split second too late. He swung the bat blindly, a desperate wild haymaker aimed at my head. I ducked under it, feeling the whoosh of air displace the raindrops near my ear. I drove my shoulder into his midsection. It was like hitting a concrete piling. The impact jarred my teeth, sending a fresh spike of agony through my injured left arm, but it moved him. He stumbled back, his boots slipping in the churned-up mud, and fell hard onto his ass. I didn't stop to finish him. I lunged for the tree. Sarah was swaying violently now, the rope cutting deep, her toes barely brushing the slick plastic of the bucket. Her eyes were rolled back, showing mostly whites. She was checking out. "Hold on!" I roared. I wrapped my good arm around her legs and heaved upward, taking her weight. She was light, too light, like a bird with hollow bones. The moment I lifted her, the tension on the rope released. She sucked in a breath that sounded like a vacuum seal breaking, a ragged, desperate gasp that rattled in her chest. "Knife!" I yelled over my shoulder, not looking back. "I need a knife!" I expected Scorpion to be on my back. I expected a knife in my kidneys. But the woods were alive with noise now, not just engines, voices, angry, booming voices. "Stay down. Don't you move a muscle. On the ground. Now." I felt a presence beside me. A heavy hand gripped my shoulder. I flinched, ready to fight, but a serrated blade flashed in the peripheral light. Snap. The yellow nylon parted. Sarah collapsed. I caught her before she hit the mud, my knees buckling under the sudden dead weight. We went down together into the muck. I shielded her head with my hand, pulling her against my chest. She was coughing violently, her whole body convulsing as oxygen flooded back into her starved lungs. I looked up. Standing over me was Big Mike Reynolds. He looked like an avenging angel in a flannel shirt and a trucker hat. He was holding a tire iron in one hand, and he looked furious. Behind him the woods were filling with drivers. They were sliding down the embankment, pushing through the briars surrounding the clearing. Some had flashlights, some had wrenches. One guy, a flatbedder named Tiny who weighed 300 pounds, was standing on Scorpion's chest, pinning him to the mud without even looking down. The other three locals, Ratface, Camo Poncho and Hoodie, were already on their knees, hands behind their heads, surrounded by a ring of angry men who had dealt with lot lizards and hijackers and weren't impressed by 4 rednecks in the woods. "You good, Red?" Mike asked, his voice tight. He reached down and hauled me up with one hand, careful of my bad arm. "She needs a medic," I rasped, wiping mud from my eyes. "And the girl is in my rig, locked in." "Get her out of here," Mike commanded, scanning the perimeter. "Get her to the cab. Keep 'em warm. We'll hold this trash until the Staties get through the blockade." I nodded. I scooped Sarah up. She couldn't walk. Her feet were raw, her legs useless from the strain. I carried her bridle style, stumbling back toward the logging road. The walk back was a blur of pain. My left arm was useless now, hanging dead at my side, throbbing in time with my heartbeat. Every step through the sucking mud sent a jolt through my spine. Sarah was clinging to my jacket, burying her face in the grease-stained wool, sobbing quietly. "He's gonna kill us," she whispered, her voice a broken rasp. "He knows people. He knows the law." "Not tonight," I grunted, stepping over a fallen log. "Tonight the law is parked on the shoulder." We broke through the tree line and back onto the gravel turnout. The sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks for a second. It was beautiful. Route 66 was a parking lot. A solid wall of trucks stretched as far as the eye could see in the mist, their running lights amber beads on a string. They had blocked both lanes, the shoulders and the ditch. Engines were idling, a low collective growl that vibrated the ground. Drivers were standing by their rigs, arms crossed, watching the woods. When they saw me emerge carrying the woman, a ripple went through the line. I made it to my Peterbilt. I kicked the door 3 times. The signal. "It's me!" I yelled. "Open up!" The lock clicked. I pulled the door open and hoisted Sarah up into the passenger seat. The little girl, who had been huddled under the dash, let out a scream that broke my heart all over again. "Mama!" She launched herself at her mother. I had to catch them both to keep them from tumbling out of the cab. I pushed them gently inside and climbed up after them, slamming the heavy door against the night. The silence inside the cab was sudden and jarring. The roar of the engines was muffled to a dull hum. The heater was blasting, but the air smelled of wet dog, old coffee, and fear. I locked the doors, both of them. Then I pulled the curtains shut across the windshield and side windows, sealing us in a cocoon of shadow and dashboard glow. "Let me look," I said gently. I turned on the map light. Sarah was a mess. The bruising around her neck was already turning, a terrifying shade of purple-black. Her eye was swollen shut, but she was breathing. She was alive. She was clutching her daughter so tight her knuckles were white. "Here," I said, reaching into the sleeper berth and grabbing a bottle of water and the first aid kit I kept for emergencies. "Drink this. Slow." She took the water with shaking hands. The little girl was checking her mother's face, her tiny fingers tracing the bruises, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Did you kill him?" the girl asked, looking at me with a ferocity that no 7-year-old should have. "Did you kill the scorpion?" "He's being handled," I said, tearing open an antiseptic wipe. "Your mum is safe. You're safe." I started cleaning the cut on the girl's shoulder. She didn't flinch. She was too busy watching the door. "You don't know him," Sarah whispered, lowering the water bottle. Her voice was getting stronger, but it was filled with a dread that chilled me. "The man with the tattoo. He's not just some guy. That's Donnie Ray. His brother is the sheriff. His cousin runs the county. They run everything out here." I paused, holding the antiseptic wipe. "The sheriff?" I asked. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "Why do you think I didn't call the police? Donnie calls the sheriff comes out, and they laugh. They laugh, and they put me back in the house." She grabbed my wrist. "We have to leave, please. If the sheriff comes, he won't arrest Donnie. He'll kill us to keep us quiet." I looked at the dashcam mounted on the windshield. The little red recording light was steady. "Nobody is killing anyone," I said, my voice hardening. "I got everything on video. The audio of the threats, the visual of the rope. That goes to the state police, not the locals." "You don't understand," she sobbed. "They won't let the state police get here." As if on cue, a siren wailed. It wasn't the distant rising wail of a highway patrol cruiser approaching from the city. It was close, aggressive. And it was coming from the woods side of the road, down the old service trail that bypassed the highway blockage. I ripped the curtain back just an inch. A black SUV with tinted windows and a light bar hidden in the grille tore out of the service road, kicking up a spray of gravel. It was followed by a county sheriff's cruiser. They didn't stop for the line of trucks. They drove aggressively right up to the front of my rig, blocking me in against the tree line. The SUV door flew open. A man stepped out. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my truck, but he had mud on his dress shoes. He had a gold badge clipped to his belt, but he moved like a thug. Behind him, 2 deputies in brown uniforms got out of the cruiser. They had their hands on their holsters. "That's him," Sarah gasped, shrinking down onto the floorboard, pulling her daughter down with her. "That's the mayor. That's Donnie's cousin." The mayor didn't look worried about the 50 truckers watching him. He looked angry. He marched up to my driver's side door and banged on the glass with a heavy gold ring. Bang, bang, bang. "Driver!" he shouted. "Open this vehicle, immediately!" I looked at Sarah. "Stay down. Don't make a sound." I rolled the window down 2 inches, just enough to hear, not enough to reach through. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my hand was resting on the air horn cord. "I am Mayor Hatcher," the man spat. His face was flushed. We have a report of a kidnapping involving a minor in this vehicle. You are ordered to exit the cab and release the passengers into the custody of the sheriff's department. He was smooth. He was turning it around. He knew the other truckers were watching, so he was playing the role of the concerned official. Kidnapping. He was trying to frame me. I have 2 victims in here, I said loud enough for the deputies to hear. The victims of an attempted murder down in those woods. I have dashcam footage of the whole thing, including your cousin Donnie putting a noose around a woman's neck. The mayor's eyes flickered. For a second, the mask slipped. I saw the panic. Then it was gone, replaced by cold menace. I don't know what you're talking about, Hatcher said, leaning closer to the crack in the window. Open this door, or we will breach it. You are obstructing justice and endangering a child. I'm waiting for the state police, I said. They're 5 minutes out. State has no jurisdiction here, Hatcher screamed, losing his composure. This is my county. Open the goddamn door. He reached for the door handle and yanked. It was locked. He signaled to the deputies. Break it, Hatcher yelled. Get them out. The 2 deputies stepped forward. One of them pulled a telescoping baton. The other unholstered his service weapon, a Glock. He didn't point it at me, but he held it at the low ready. Sir, the deputy said, exit the vehicle or we will open fire. And my heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the nightmare scenario. Local law enforcement gone rogue. If I open the door, the dashcam disappears, the woman disappears, and I probably catch a bullet for resisting arrest. I looked in the mirror. The wall of trucks behind us was silent. They were watching. They saw the badge. They saw the uniform. They were confused. They had come to stop a hanging, but now the law was here claiming I was the bad guy. Doubt was rippling through the ranks. I could see it in their posture. They didn't want to fight a cop. I had to do something fast. I grabbed the CB mic. Breaker 19, I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. Look at them. They aren't arresting me. They're trying to kill the witness. That's the mayor. He's related to the guy in the woods. Do not let them take her. Hatcher heard me broadcasting. He went purple. Smash the window, he shrieked. The deputy with the baton swung. Crack! The safety glass spiderwebbed, but didn't shatter. The little girl screamed from the floorboard. Do it again! Hatcher yelled. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from under my seat. I pulled the pin. If they came through that window, I was going to blind them. Crack! The window gave way. Glass showered into my lap. The deputy reached in, his hand fumbling for the lock. Get out! He yelled, grabbing my collar. I slammed the base of the fire extinguisher down on his hand. He howled and yanked his arm back. Shoot him! Hatcher screamed. Shoot the driver! The deputy with the gun raised it. I stared down the barrel of a .40 caliber pistol, realizing this was how it ended. In a gravel lot in Missouri, killed by a cop protecting a murderer. I flinched, waiting for the flash, but the flash didn't come. Instead, a shadow fell over the mayor. Put the gun down, son. The voice was deep, calm, and terrifyingly authoritative. Hatcher spun around. The deputy froze. Big Mike was standing right behind them, and he wasn't alone. While the mayor had been focused on my cab, the line of truckers had moved. They had silently walked up the gravel. There were 50 of them now, forming a tight semicircle around the SUV and the cruiser. They held tire irons, winch bars, heavy flashlights, chains. They weren't attacking. They were just present. A wall of blue-collar iron that no badge could intimidate. The deputy with the gun looked at the 50 men. He looked at Big Mike, who was holding a heavy steel cheetah bar like a baseball bat. He looked at his shaking hand. I said, Mike repeated, stepping so close his chest bumped the deputy's shoulder, put the gun down, unless you plan on shooting all of us. Hatcher looked around, his eyes wild. This is insurrection. I'll have you all arrested, every single one of you. On what charge? Another driver spoke up, a woman with a fierce scar on her cheek. Parking violation? Back off, the deputy yelled, swinging his gun toward the crowd. Back the hell off! The tension was so thick you could choke on it. One twitch of a finger, one loud noise, and this turnout was going to turn into a war zone. I could see the fear in the deputy's eyes. He was a kid, maybe 25, caught between a corrupt boss and an army of tired, angry men who knew exactly what justice looked like. "Driver," Mike said, not taking his eyes off the gun. "You got that video?" "I got it," I yelled through the broken window. "It's all here." "You hear that, Mayor?" Mike said softly. "The truth is on that card, and you ain't getting it." "You're dead," Hatcher hissed at Mike. "You're all dead." "Maybe," Mike shrugged, "but not before the state police see what's on that camera." Hatcher reached into his jacket. "He's got a piece," someone yelled. The crowd surged forward. The deputy panicked. He swung the gun back toward me. I didn't think. I yanked the air horn cord and held it down. The sound was deafening at point-blank range. The deputy flinched, covering his ears. The gun dipped. In that split second of distraction, Mike moved. He didn't swing the bar. He just reached out with a hand the size of a catcher's mitt and grabbed the slide of the deputy's pistol. He wrenched it out of the kid's hand with a twist that must have dislocated a finger. The gun clattered to the gravel. "We are done here," Mike roared, kicking the gun under my truck. "Nobody moves! Nobody dies!" Hatcher froze, his hand half in, half out of his jacket. He looked at the circle of men. He looked at the unarmed deputy nursing his hand. He looked at me, staring at him through the broken window with cold, hard hate. He slowly pulled his hand out of his jacket. It was empty. "You're making a big mistake," Hatcher whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "We make 'em every day," I said, brushing the glass off my lap, "but not tonight." We stood there in the rain, 50 truckers, 2 corrupt cops, and a mayor who knew his life was over, waiting for the sound of the real sirens. And in the distance, cutting through the Ozark mist, we finally heard them. The arrival of the state police wasn't like in the movies. It wasn't a synchronized slide of vehicles. It was a chaotic, overwhelming swarm. The highway patrol had to weave through the miles of backed-up traffic, driving on the grass, the medians, and the wrong side of the road to get to us. When the first blue and gold cruisers broke through the line of semi-trucks, the tension in the turnout shifted from war zone to crime scene. 4 troopers bailed out of the lead cars, service weapons drawn, screaming commands. They didn't know who the bad guys were yet. All they saw was a mob of men with tire irons surrounding a county sheriff's vehicle and a smashed-up Peterbilt. "Drop the weapons! Everybody on the ground! Now!" Big Mike didn't drop his cheetah bar. He slowly, deliberately lowered it to the gravel and raised his hands, palms open. The other 50 drivers did the same. It was a ripple effect of compliance, no resistance, just calm, heavy silence. The young deputy who had almost shot me was practically hyperventilating. He threw his hands up so fast he almost knocked his hat off. Mayor Hatcher, however, saw his lifeline. "Officer!" Hatcher screamed, running toward the lead trooper, a tall, broad-shouldered captain with a face like carved granite. "Thank God! These men are rioting. They assaulted a police officer. They have a kidnapped woman and child in that truck." Hatcher pointed a shaking finger at me. "Arrest him! Arrest that driver right now!" The captain didn't move. He looked at the mayor. He looked at the unarmed deputy. He looked at the circle of truckers standing like a Praetorian guard around my rig. Then he looked at me, sitting amidst the shattered glass of my driver's side window. "Secure the weapons!" the captain barked to his men, ignoring Hatcher completely. "Separate everyone. I want this lot locked down. Nobody leaves." 2 troopers moved toward my truck. "Driver," the captain said, walking up to my door. He saw the fire extinguisher in my lap. He saw the blood on my face from the glass. "Step out of the vehicle, slowly." I looked at Sarah. She was terrified again. "It's okay," I said, my voice hoarse. "These are the good guys. Keep the door locked until I tell you." I opened the door and stepped down into the gravel. My knees almost gave out. The adrenaline dump was hitting me hard now, leaving me shaking and cold. The pain in my left arm was a throbbing, white-hot rhythm that made my vision blur at the edges. "Hands on the hood," the captain said. Firm, professional, but not aggressive. He patted me down, checking for weapons. "I'm the one who called it in," I said, leaning my forehead against the cold, wet metal of my fender. "Code red, mile marker 142. "Your red line?" the captain asked. "Yes, sir." "You got a hell of a following, red line," the captain muttered, glancing at the army of truckers being corralled by his officers. "We've been getting calls from dispatch for 20 minutes. They said there was a lynching happening." "Attempted," I corrected him. "Down in the woods, the logging trail. You'll find 4 men tied up down there. One of them is named Donnie Ray. He's the one who put the rope around her neck." "Lies!" Hatcher shouted from 10 feet away. He was being held back by a trooper, but he was fighting it. "This man is a lunatic. Donnie Ray is a respected businessman. He was searching for the missing girl." The captain turned to Hatcher. "Sir, if you don't lower your voice, you're going in the back of a unit." "I am the mayor of this county," Hatcher spat, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "And that man," he pointed at the deputy, "is a sworn officer of the law who was disarmed by this mob. I demand you release my cousin and arrest these vigilantes." The captain looked at me. "Is that true? Did your boys disarm a deputy?" He was pointing a loaded weapon at a 7-year-old girl, I said quietly. "We didn't have a choice." "He's lying," Hatcher shrieked. "He's trying to cover up a kidnapping." The captain sighed. He looked tired. He was dealing with a jurisdictional nightmare, local politics versus state law, with 50 witnesses and a potential capital crime. He needed clarity. "He says kidnapping," the captain said to me. "You say rescue. That's a lot of he said, she said." I reached into my pocket. My hand was shaking, but I managed to pull out the SD card I had ejected from the dashcam right before I stepped out. It was a tiny piece of black plastic, no bigger than a fingernail, but it weighed more than the truck itself. "It's not he said, she said," I said, holding the card up. "It's all on here, Captain. 4K video, high-definition audio. You'll hear the mayor order his deputy to shoot me. You'll hear him try to breach the truck, and if you scrub back about 20 minutes, you'll hear the audio from the woods." Hatcher stopped screaming. He froze. He stared at the little black square in my hand like it was a piece of radioactive uranium. That's illegal surveillance," Hatcher stammered, his voice suddenly weak. "You can't use that." The captain took the card from my hand. He held it up to the light, inspecting it. Then he looked at Hatcher. A slow, cold smile spread across the captain's face. "Sir," the captain said, "in the state of Missouri, dashcam footage is admissible evidence, especially when it captures a felony in progress." He handed the card to a tech trooper. "Run it. Now." The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I stood by the hood of my truck, the rain starting to drizzle again, washing the blood off the gravel. The paramedics had arrived and were tending to Sarah and her daughter inside the ambulance, but I refused to leave the truck until I knew it was over. Hatcher was pacing in circles, sweating through his expensive suit. The deputy was sitting on the bumper of the cruiser, head in his hands, crying. Then the tech trooper came back. He was holding a laptop. He walked straight to the captain, whispered something, and turned the screen so the captain could see. I watched the captain's face. It went hard. Stone hard. He watched for maybe 30 seconds. Then he closed the laptop with a snap that sounded like a gunshot. He turned around and walked straight toward the mayor. "Mayor Hatcher," the captain said, his voice carrying across the silent lot. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." You can't be serious," Hatcher whispered. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, assault on a minor, and—" The captain glanced at the deputy. "Solicitation of capital murder. Cuff him." 2 troopers grabbed Hatcher. He didn't fight. He just sagged, all the air going out of him. The arrogance evaporated, leaving just a small, scared man in handcuffs. "And him?" I asked, nodding at the young deputy. The captain looked at the kid. "He's going in too. He'll have his day in court, but he's done wearing a badge." I let out a breath that I felt like I'd been holding since I left Texas. My legs finally gave out, and I sat down heavily on the running board of my Pete. "You okay, Red?" I looked up. Big Mike was standing there. He had been released by the troopers, though they had confiscated his cheetah bar for evidence. "I'm alive, Mike," I said. "Truck's a mess, arms busted, but I'm alive." "We passed the hat," Mike said, shoving a wad of cash into my shirt pocket. "Boys chipped in, for the window and for a hot meal." I looked at the crumpled bills. $20 here, 50 there. Money these guys earned mile by hard mile. I tried to give it back. "Mike, I can't—" "Shut up, driver," Mike grinned, clapping me on my good shoulder. "You earned it, and besides, you got a passenger to say goodbye to." I looked toward the ambulance. The back doors were open. Sarah was sitting on the stretcher, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked battered, but her eyes were clear. The little girl was standing next to her, clutching the paramedic's hand. When she saw me, she broke away. She ran across the gravel, dodging the troopers and the puddles. She didn't stop until she hit me, burying her face in my stomach. I winced as she bumped my bad arm, but I wrapped my good hand around her small back. "You came back," she sobbed into my shirt. "You came back." "I told you I would," I whispered, resting my chin on the top of her head. "We don't leave people behind, not out here." She pulled back and looked at me. Her face was clean now, the mud washed away, revealing a constellation of freckles across her nose. She looked older than she had an hour ago. Trauma does that. It steals your childhood and replaces it with a heavy kind of wisdom. "My mom says we're going to my aunt's house," she said. "She says we're never coming back here." "That's a good plan," I said. "You go be a kid again, okay? You forget about the bad men. They're gone." "I won't forget you," she said seriously. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Here." I reached into the glove box through the shattered window and pulled out the St. Christopher medal. It was silver, worn smooth by years of worry, hanging on a cheap beaded chain. My grandmother gave it to me before I deployed the first time. It had been to hell and back. "Take this," I said, pressing it into her hand. "St. Christopher. He watches over travelers. As long as you have that, you're never alone." She squeezed it tight, then stood on her tiptoes and kissed my cheek. "Thank you, Redline," she whispered. She ran back to the ambulance. I watched as they loaded up. Sarah waved to me through the back window as they pulled away, lights flashing, heading towards safety. The lot was clearing out. The captain gave the all clear, and the blockade was lifted. It was a sight I'll never forget. One by one, the engines fired up. The ground rumbled as 50 diesel motors caught life. Air brakes hissed. The amber running lights flickered on, painting the wet asphalt in gold. As they rolled out, passing my truck, every single driver did the same thing. They didn't wave, they didn't cheer. They just tapped their air horn once, a short, sharp blast of respect. Punk, punk, punk. It was a rolling salute, a language that only we speak. It said, "We see you." It said, "We got your back." It said, "Drive safe, brother." Big Mike was the last one to leave. He rolled down his window as his massive Kenworth idled beside me. "Get that arm checked, Red," he said, "and get some sleep. You look like 10 miles of bad road." "See you on the flip side, Mike," I said. He grinned, shifted gears, and rolled out into the night. Then it was just me. The silence returned to the turnout, heavier than before. The rain had stopped completely. The clouds were breaking in the east, revealing a faint grey bruise of light where the sun was trying to rise. I stood there for a long time, just listening to the engine of my Peterbilt idling. The old girl had a few new scars. The window was gone. The door panel was dented where the mayor had kicked it. The floorboard was muddy. I grabbed a roll of duct tape and a heavy plastic trash bag from the side box. I taped up the window, sealing the cab against the morning chill. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold until Tulsa. I climbed back into the driver's seat. My left arm was throbbing with a dull, sickening ache, probably a hairline fracture, Definitely a deep bone bruise. I popped 2 ibuprofen from the first aid kit and washed them down with the last dregs of cold, bitter coffee. I looked at the empty passenger seat. The mud stains were still there. The wrapper from the antiseptic wipe was on the floor. I thought about the rope. I thought about the bucket. I thought about how close the world is to darkness, every single second of every single day. Most people drive down these highways and see nothing but asphalt and billboards. They don't see the woods. They don't see the monsters waiting in the turnouts. But we see them, and as long as we're rolling, they don't get to win. I released the parking brake. The hiss of air was the most comforting sound in the world. I put the transmission in gear and eased the clutch out. The tires crunched over the gravel, biting into the pavement of Route 66. I checked my mirrors. The turnout was empty. The ghosts were gone. I turned the radio up, catching a country station fading in from Springfield. I kept my eyes on the white lines, watching them feed into the hood, one after another, endless and hypnotic. I was tired. I was hurt. I was broke. But as the sun finally broke the horizon, painting the wet highway in stripes of fire and gold, I didn't feel heavy anymore. I felt light. I shifted to high gear, hammered the throttle, and let the big diesel engine sing me back to sleep.